think we're all ready.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh, everyone.
So far, everyone is just a few, but hello.
That's
Tom's here. That's all that matters.
See, everyone's smiling, so things are going well.
Perfect world we live in, right?
Well, I think there's some imperfections now and then.
Yeah. Maybe one or two.
Yeah. At least they keep me up at night. I'm sure they do for you, Scott.
Yeah, well, what's going on right now clearly shows that what was happening in the streets of Ottawa was not about freedom.
Yeah. Or redefined.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily know that Canadians truly understand most Canadians truly understand what a lack of freedom really is.
Yeah. Well, all I have to do is watch CNN now and then. You got a good example of what freedom is all about.
Yeah. It's odd. It's almost like a prequel, but the Netflix documentary Winter on Fire, which is about the 2014 Ukrainian revolution, is exactly where this started. It's everything that Putin is doing started right there with the overthrow of the former Ukrainian president, who was partial to Putin and is actually now in exile in Russia.
Yeah.
So it's this whole thing started 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Putin thinks he's going to be the next Tsar of Russia with its empire.
Yeah.
At least that's his vision.
Yeah, it's concerning.
It's very concerning.
All right, so we're getting toward quorum here, if we don't have it already.
Chair,
Yeah.
Steve is just having some problems getting in, so he had the wrong link. So he'll be here in a minute. So sorry.
No, it's all good. That's an understandable issue. There was a last minute link change.
Yes, so we were both sitting in the wrong room, but I got in, and so now I'm getting him in. So he should be here in a moment.
Okay. We have bare quorum, 7 of 13. But it's quorum. So we'll just wait a couple more minutes and then we'll go. Okay, so we're waiting for anyone else for the presentation. Is it being done by Steve, Charmaine, and John?
I'm actually doing the presentation myself, and the others are here for questions.
Okay, perfect. So no, we're not expecting Dana Collins or Don Herward tonight?
Dunn's not available. I had Don Buck, Kevin Lamer, Charmaine, and Lily were accepted. So John's here, I see. I don't see all the panelists.
No, Kevin and yeah, John.
I don't think Kevin's coming.
Okay, and then Lily?
I don't know, but we can speak to it. I'm happy to speak to anything that comes up, and Steve's well versed.
Is he?
Yeah, he's quite smart. Thanks.
You work for him. Yes, you have to say that. Like, you literally have to say that.
Mayor Barry Wells say things like that. She's the only one that does. So.
That's not true. I privately call you smart all the time. Okay, well, we'll get going. I mean, obviously, if other people come in, it is 5:36 after all. So if other people show up, they can obviously join us. We only have the one item today, but I did email you all to suggest that we could also have a conversation about next term. I mean, we do have one more meeting at some point in this term. I can't remember if it's before or after I leave. I guess it's right before I leave, assuming I feel like staying to the end of the term. Eric, is the next meeting about October, November-ish?
It's about the time of year, yes, Chair. I don't think a specific date has been set yet.
Okay. Yeah, so we did want to talk about that because I think it's a good time to talk about now as opposed to later, especially when we're looking at this committee as it goes forward. I mean, I've been on it since we created it. As you might have recognized, I'm the only counselor that seems to ever come, which is a concern that we have to go into next term. And I want to make sure that we have this committee be as beneficial as it can be, but we need council support for that. So, but I do think having a conversation tonight after we do the work 2022 work plan, just about next term, it can also give us a chance to look at the governance of the committee into next term, make recommendations for how this committee can move ahead and be useful. Because I do believe it is useful. I think it's the only public forum really that we have parties from all different groups involved in one discussion: city staff, development ministry, members of the community. I think it's incredibly useful panel. So I think we need to get the most out of it. So I think it's something that Steve and I and others, I think, will think about between now and the end of the term when we do put forward our governance report, which will be recommended for approval by the next term of council. So with that, I see Shannon Bassett and Carolyn McKenzie have joined us. So I don't think there's a need to do a roll call. I mean, we see who's here. Just a reminder, and Claude Schellenberger has also joined us here. Just a reminder that we are recording this and it will be posted on YouTube afterwards. So we don't live stream, but we will post on YouTube after the meeting. So we'll go right into it. So we have, again, just the one item tonight, declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest? None. Perfect. Confirmation of minutes. So we did just on that. We don't have the French minutes prepared for approval. So as such, we won't confirm the minutes from our November 10th, 2021 meeting tonight. We will hold those and bring them back at the next meeting. So the minutes from tonight and the last meeting will be done at the next meeting. Carolyn, question on that?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Just because there's a lot of space between this meeting and our next meeting. On those minutes, I just looked at them very, very briefly, obviously, but I noticed that one of the actions was to come back with the question that I had posed, which was about the timing of the quick hits report. I may not get the names right on these things, but the quick hits report for the zoning review, the theme discussion papers, as well as the benchmarking or comparative analysis paper. The latter two, I believe the theme discussion papers, as well as the benchmarking analysis in the work plan that was approved by council last January, if I'm not mistaken. Those were scheduled, perhaps not for public engagement, it's not clear to me, but to be completed in Q2 and Q3 of 2021. So my question was about when could we expect public consultation on all of those items. The minutes just reflect that I had asked for the timing about the quick hits report. Now, I did follow up with that after I realized I hadn't received a response. I did get a response from staff that talked about the theme discussion papers in particular being the subject of public consultation after the approval by the province of the official plan. So if that's the answer, that's the answer. I guess my question, I'm sorry to get into detail, but if we could just make a note perhaps to whoever does these things to update the action there so that we can come back with a complete answer. And I guess my question would be, why would we wait so long to put those out into the public realm? The benchmarking also, I can't imagine what would change if in that benchmarking analysis with any adjustments to the official plan the province might make. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, I will say, so Steve will comment. I will say that we are just working on providing notice for a special joint meeting of Planning Committee as well as Agricultural Affairs Committee to meet on April 22nd to deal with the implementation report arising from the new official plan, as well as the Big Moves report, which was commented on last year. Steve Willis.
Yeah, so Chair, thanks for the opportunity. And Carolyn, you raised a really good point. We've had our work plan a little bit thrown haywire this year by some changing directions from council and other priorities. So things that we thought we were going to do in what order have changed a little bit because of what council's told us to do. But what we'll commit to do, and Charmaine can talk to David Wise's group, is we'll actually generate a memo to this committee like we normally generate memos to council and just give the latest information on this to this committee. So you'll get that information. And it's also part of, as Chair Moffat says, when the joint committee start discussing kind of the work plan as we go forward post OP implementation, it'll be part of that as well. But I don't mind us generating a memo specifically to everyone here with that information.
Okay, that's great. Thanks again. Just would encourage getting those things out, get them on the website so that they're in the public realm, so people can start thinking about them. So we're not saying, oh, we're squeezed for time on these things to properly, think things through. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to to Steve Willis. So we're going to the one item on the agenda, which is the Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development Department, which is, it's not called that anymore. So it's now called the Planning, Real Estate, and Economic Development Department.
And
so
I'll explain that as we get started.
So 2022 work plan, Steve Willis, Charmaine Forgy is also here, and John Buck. John Buck is our chief building official, and Charmaine Forgy is our chief bottle washer, because she does a little bit of everything at in our planning group. I mean, she was instrumental in coordinating a lot of moving parts when it came to the official plan, the meeting, all the work that went into it behind the scenes with the members of council, members of the public, and the motions and delegations and whatnot. So, yes, I understand that bottle washer is like, CEO in my mind. So, all right, Steve, let's go ahead.
Great. So Eric, if we can put the presentation up, and I'm going to start in the front page with just explain what the department is these days and what the new configuration is and what's behind that. And then I'll work you through the 2022 work plan for the department. So first of all, our new name is the Planning, Real Estate, and Economic Development Department, and that was started as of January 1st. And really, it's a culmination of a series of internal organizational changes that go back a little bit. That about 1 year and 2 years ago now, the corporate real estate group came into our department when there was a change in the finance department. So they've been part of our team for a little while. And then last October, when they changed the transportation services department to be a transit-focused department, transportation planning came into our department as well at that point in time. And then traffic operations went over to Public Works Department at that point in time in the city. So we became, planning, infrastructure, real estate, transportation planning, economic development. That's where we were. And then in the new year, starting in January, a further corporate reorganization, understanding that some departments' mandates like ours were getting really too big. A new department was created called Infrastructure and Water Services, which took in the whole Ottawa water management side, and it also took infrastructure services that used to be part of our group as well. So that was the design and construction of municipal infrastructure projects. So that's now part of the new Infrastructure and Water Services Department. So I can tell you, I have mixed feelings about that, because I always loved working with the teams who are implementing construction projects. So got to work on the new main central library as part of that. That's no longer part of our role, but they wish them well as they're in their new journey in a brand new department. The other context piece I wanted to give is talking about 2022. And I think people understand that later this year is a municipal election. So what that means for us is we actually have fewer council meetings over the course of the year in which we can bring reports forward. It's actually quite a truncated year. And we also, we're reaching at the end of this mandate, and we expect some significant changes in the composition of council next time between people who have said they're not running. And we know we will have a new mayor no matter what. So that will mean things will change. And also at the end of the 4-year cycle, it brings to the end the current city strategic plan, which is not a land use plan document. It's actually the corporate strategic plan. And the new term of council will set a new strategic plan and new priorities for what we would do. And our department's work often is driven by those priorities as much as it is by motions and activities by council itself. So a lot of this year's work program is finishing off things that we promised to do this term of council and in a truncated year. So that's really you'll see those themes in our presentation. But the Chair Moffat and I did talk a little bit that I actually, as we're going into the preparatory work for a brand new council, a new city strategic plan, and really a new departmental work plan for the next term of council, I actually would value some feedback tonight from you about really what should we be focusing in on the next term of council. We have some things in this presentation, and I can tell you some of the internal thinking that we're working on as well, but I actually do want some feedback on that. So if I can go to the next slide, please. So I'm first going to give you just a quick snapshot of some highlights from 2021. And then I'm going to break down the work plans between all of the service areas that report through Planning Committee, which is the linkage to this committee. We have other work that the department does that reports through other standing committees, such as Environment or Finance and Economic Development and like, and those are not linked to the mandate of this committee. But if anybody has questions on those other areas, I'm happy to answer. So we focused primarily on where this committee has a mandate. Is it really helping advise towards planning, the Department and Planning Committee and Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. So as I said, we'll break down by building code services, Charmaine's group, which is business and technical support services, economic development and long-range planning services, which is the approvals group, and then the right-of-way heritage and urban design group. So next slide, please. Which is just a title slide, which is the highlight. So we'll go to the next slide, which is kind of fun. I mean, it is actually amazing the amount of work that gets done in any given year around the department, and I can never give a presentation and cover everything that the staff do. I mean, I have a really hardworking team that really does do an enormous amount, and we just tried to pick some snapshots from different service areas so that you can get a flavor of the whole department as well. So infrastructure services, one of the big projects they completed this past year was the renovation and expansion of Blackburn Hamlet's Lois Kemp Arena. Really great project. We really proud of what we managed to do and got accolades from the community. It's a real modernization of an older building, and it's a real community hub, and it has brand new accessible inclusivity features that it did not have before. And as you can imagine, a lot of the city's community centers were all built in a very similar age and era, and a lot of them are reaching that, just like me, a little bit long in the tooth, and in there as buildings, and they need significant renewals. So we are working our way in time around the city, trying to get investments in those areas. And sometimes like this, we managed to get some senior government funding to match up what the city was doing as well to do this. We had a lot of complicated development approvals this year, as we always do in any one year. Really interesting project is at 2 Robinson and 320 Lees, which is really a transit-oriented development project. It's a mixed-use development. It has a 6-story podium with 2 towers at 28 stories and one at 32. And it's just shy of 1,500 residential units, and we have 1,500 bicycle parking spaces, which may be a new record for some of these infill projects. So the number of bicycle parking spaces in a project. It was an interesting project. It was a very tough site because of its location, and we managed to resolve a lot of issues and improve a lot of the street connectivity and some of the section 30. Where there was no mandatory section 37 because of the existing zoning, but there was a number of contributions in this project outside of section 37 to improve like the cycling connectivity in the immediate area as well. Really important project for the entire city is the approvals that have gone into this year for the new Ottawa Hospital. This is a $3 billion project. It'd be the largest single investment in Ottawa outside of the LRT system in history, and it's probably going to end up being one of the largest buildings ever built in Ottawa. And it's also it's so much more than a hospital. It's a new modern hospital. It's a state-of-the-art research institution that will attract some of the best and brightest minds from around the world to work in Ottawa. And we have the main hospital building, and we also have research institutes that are coming part of this as well. It's complicated whenever we're dealing with the province, because the province sets the ground rules for dealing with hospitals, and we're always competing with other cities to get the investment in our city for a new hospital, because lots of other communities want them as well. But all the work we've done has kept the provincial funding on track, and we're really looking forward to having it. The existing Civic, if any of you had been in there recently, I've had through the last number of years lots of instances with my elderly parents through there, and we can know how difficult it is to keep that facility going in its current format. So we really do need a modern hospital in Ottawa. This group's talked to us about the completion of the new official plan, and we really did do this in a remarkably fast pace, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I think in Ottawa we've done a lot of the right things, but did it the Ottawa way. Some of you may have seen the Provincial Housing Task Force recommendations that came out recently, and that talked about a lot of things we need to do. I think in the spirit of that task force, they were trying to do a lot of good things, in that Ottawa did on its own. Our council had the courage to do a lot of the intensification, to try to have a more balanced growth management model through that new official plan, and we created new opportunities, and we had an almost unanimous vote at council on the new official plan, and that's not an easy feat through the process. I acknowledge fully that was a very fast process. The zoning will not go that fast. Zoning bylaws never, because the level of detail are so much more complicated. It will be a slower process and more fine-grained, and probably in a series of tranches over time as we resolve issues and try to modernize our zoning bylaw. What I like about the new official plan is it's eminently more readable than the old one, and it's visual, and they're more easy tools to kind of understand the intent of council in that new document. The new zoning bylaw has to really be likewise a much more modern, user-friendly document, because I will say, I think the existing bylaw, because it's been amended so many times and it's based on a very old model, is very unfriendly to use. It's very hard. Even though I've been in the field a very, very long time, I get flustered sometimes even trying to understand it in certain sites when I go look up things, and it's got to get a lot better than that. You want it to be much more intuitive for people to be able to use, and you don't want people to have to hire 3 lawyers to interpret it. So I really have grand goals about making it a much more user-friendly document in the future. Another big win for the city was the approval of the joint Ottawa Public Library, Library and Archives Canada new main central library, which is called Adasoke. It's an exciting project. Construction's beginning. This will be a big legacy piece for the downtown, and also kicking off development in the LeBreton Flats. And the other fun one that I wanted to draw your attention to is the digital twin project, which is something we were quietly working on. And I think through the official plan process, there are people like Carolyn, for example, when I had a long conversation about the need to be much more visually effective when we're doing our planning documents in the future. And the digital twin is a virtual it's an online version of the city that is actually a digital construction, total digital model of parts of the city that we've been working on with Carleton University to help us have better digital tools for showing development applications in time, and new secondary plans, and how we do this. And this is our geospatial analytics group has been working really, really hard with Carleton to try to set this up. So it's very much a work in progress. We've come a long way, and I think it'll be a lot easier to, I really do see the day when we're planning committee and we pull up the digital 3D model and turn it around, look at it a little bit as we're talking about as people are actually making proposals, make it easier to do. And certainly for secondary planning work, it'll be a big deal, a big difference for what we try to do. We've been using SketchUp and other tools in the last couple of years, which are good. It's way above where we used to be, but this will take it to a whole new level. Let me go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about building code services, and John's here. John, our chief building official, is here if people want to get into a bit more detail on this. In last year, John phoned me up. I think it was late October, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and phoned me up and said we hit a whole, we broke a very significant milestone, and it actually had more building permits fees paid to us than we'd had in previous years. And that wasn't even the end of the year, and we were keeping on going. So we had a record year for the number of applications in Ottawa, and size of applications, complexity of applications, and really the economic impact of those in Ottawa. And and it's always the indicator, because planning sometimes doesn't always lead to projects. Sometimes people advance plans and they don't necessarily proceed. But the real indicator of what's really going on the ground are those building permit statistics. That is the real indicator of how much we're building in the year. And so John's team is always responsible for the initial approvals of permits, the inspections during construction. And they also have an enforcement team that deals with problems with compliance. And so they're a very, very busy group. And I will say to this group that I'm extremely proud that they were the only major city building code service that did not shut down at any point during the pandemic. We never shut down a single day. We pivoted our operations and we kept things going. And I'll tell you that I will vividly remember probably the rest of my career, a day I sat down with John's predecessor, Frank Badin, and said, if we shut down building permits, we are shutting down thousands of people's jobs in Ottawa. And we understood that, and we made a determination that we were going to find a way not to do that. And the other benefit of never shutting down is we didn't create the backlog when we restarted that other cities had. So I'm still blown away from my building code team, who very, very dedicated people who work very, very hard. And so in terms of our 2022 focus, we're updating the pool enclosure bylaw, which hasn't been looked at since 2013. There is some mechanical things in our building bylaw, which talks about how we want to run our building code operations. That has to also be reviewed. It hasn't been looked at since 2014. Municipal addressing bylaw is a complicated bylaw. It's needs again an update. And one thing we're really excited about is we had the first go live moment of a brand new technology system for managing our tracking of building permit applications. It's the internal facing side that handles all of the permit issuance and inspection side is live to us for our own staff to use, and within a very short period of time, the public facing side, so that if you're an applicant, we'll see the brand new land management system. And it's replacing an antiquated system that's also used by our planning approvals group, that I swear is being held together by elastic bands and paper clips. It's a technology that's no longer even supported. So this is a really critical back office tool we need that we've put on. And as I said, we continue to adjust our operations every time COVID rules change, which is because it's a very on the ground activity. You can imagine if you're going into people's homes or you're going into construction sites, we have to keep changing our operational practices as the rules change around us. So next slide, please. So our business and technical support services, which is a group that's, almost every project the department does, this group has a role in somehow. They're not necessarily the people you see at the front, but they definitely are the backbone of everything we do. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This is Charmaine's group, and if any of you have worked closely with Charmaine, you know how much Charmaine personally is involved in many of these activities. So we will be releasing very shortly the community benefits charge strategy. This is the new bylaw that replaces Section 37 contributions, and it's part of the new requirements by the province since Bill 108. Section 37 disappears at the end of the year, goes away, and this will be the new system that replaces it. It's a lot like a development charge for softer services, and we'll be putting that out very shortly for review and consultation. We're also reviewing, as the pandemic changes, how we're using virtual public engagement versus in person, and we're reviewing those practices. I can tell you what we've seen since we've done these online meetings is that we're getting much higher participation rates. We're getting much more diverse groups participating, because I think it's far easier for people to kind of dial in from home if they have kids that they need to take care of or family responsibilities, dial in and listen in on a project and hear about it from their own home, as opposed to having to go to the local community center and attend in person. I think in the winter, we see particularly in the winter, our numbers are way up compared to prior years. And we're getting, racial diversity, age diversity, things that we haven't seen before. So I think that there's a, do we reset to where we were before, or do we continue on? And this is one of the things we're looking at very closely. There are some communities of the city, however, where technology is not as widespread, where people don't have it available. So we are going to have some mix of format depending on where we are in the city and the communities we're talking to. A lot of the new official plan, the work's not done. Once the minister approves it, we need to do more official plan education and awareness. And we're also going to be refreshing our planning primer courses. I'm really proud of the set we have. That they need an update because legislation's changed, the official plans change, ultimately the zoning will change. A lot of other cities look at what we offer and have kind of copied our approach. But again, we're looking for a refresh on that as well. And if people have specific suggestions on that, because I know many of you have been through those courses, please connect with Charmaine directly. We'd love to hear what you think about where we can tune those up over time. Next slide, please. And the next one, please, is economic development and long-range planning. Next slide, please. So our 2022 focus will be the new official plan implementation, and we do expect a decision by the minister in the coming weeks. I think it'll be, before spring really sets in Ottawa version of spring. I think we will hear the minister's decision on the official plan. They just completed the Environmental Bill of Rights posting comment period, so they're analyzing the comments and submissions that they got. I understand that they had something like 71 submissions, and this is above and beyond what they got right around the time council initially adopted and people filed letters as well. So the ministry staff are going through that. We do file an annual report every year on the prior year of our development activity and how we did in terms of timelines and the number of applications we processed and where that general activity was. So we're finalizing that right now. We're working on our economic development team. We basically last year said pens down on any project you're working on. We're working 100% on COVID economic recovery, and the department is so the group within the department is focused very heavily on our recovery strategy. We've been working very hard on our climate change master plan implementation, and there are a number of elements to that are being worked on right now. We've rolled out a whole number of new programs in the last year, and the high performance development standards are going to committee next week, which is another piece of the puzzle on that. We talked briefly about the new comprehensive zoning bylaw work that we're getting started on, and we're working on that climate risk and vulnerability assessment, and we've been doing some really good joint work with the National Capital Commission on looking at infrastructure vulnerability in the city, and more to say about that in the coming months as well. Next slide, please. We've also committed through this term of council to finish a series of new secondary plans, transit-oriented development ones, and those ones are ones we have to bring to the finishing line this term of council. And those include the Orleans corridor, the 174 corridor study, Riverside South community, Pinecrest Queensway Station area, and the Lincoln Field Station area. So those are the ones that we need to complete this year. And in the next term of council will tell us what they think the priorities are. Although I think during the official plan process, we'd sent some signals of ones we think need to be an early priority because of the development activity interest that we've been seeing. And one, for example, is in that category. I mean, it's up to the next council to tell us what the priorities are, but we're looking very seriously at preparatory work for the baseline corridor secondary plan because there's been so much activity. And then we also have, because the federal government is doing work on rethinking some of its major campuses as well. Confederation Heights is one that they're active on right now. And so they're driving the planning process, but we're heavily involved in working with them on that. So that'll become another big term of council, next term of council will be working on as well, but it's already started. So the next slide, please. So planning services, the group that handles all of the approvals functions for zoning, site plans, official plans, that sort of, and a number of other approvals. I think there's something like 16 different approvals that we actually process. If I can go to the next slide, please. We're seriously looking at our resources right now and how our resources are best deployed. There has been work by a number of groups looking at how Ottawa does in relationship to other municipalities in Ontario. And, it's a good news, bad news story for us. I don't always love looking at statistics like this, but, an official plan process amendment, which is a complicated project, Ottawa does about middle of the pack in Ontario. For rezonings, we're actually one of the better municipalities in Ontario in terms of rezoning timelines, but we're having significant problems on site plan and probably among the lowest performers in Ontario on site plan approvals. We take longer than most, and we have very different processes than other cities in site plan. And plans of subdivision are a really funny one. We've been doing a lot of statistical analysis in the last couple of months to figure out what's going on. And I think before we looked, I thought what we would find before we actually dug into the data, I'd say, okay, the urban ones were doing okay in this, say suburban growth areas, they're doing okay, but anything that's in the rural or villages is really slow. And I was actually wrong. I was wrong when I actually looked at that data. It wasn't actually what it showed. So as we've been digging more and more, we've been finding out that it's actually more correlated to the drainage regime and things like legal outlet and whether or not drainage engineers reports are actually required in order to get it going, get development going in an area. So areas that have more established, more mature municipal drainage systems, receiving water bodies and the like, those applications go reasonably well, and the ones that don't go on years and years and years. And so we have an area in Orleans, for example, that's probably on year 7 of an approval process because we don't yet have a drainage strategy that's fully approvable yet. So this is the interesting thing we found in some of the data we've been looking at. We've also need to look at our fees, and it is related to our resources review, and we probably will go to the next term of council to looking at a fee increase to add some more tactical resources in areas that we know that there are choke points in the process to try to do it. And these are choke points that are not necessarily public input choke points. These are things like engineering reviews that are stuck or legal agreements that are taking too long to get. These are much more process-oriented resource problems we have, and so we'll be looking at that as well. But if this level of development activity keeps up for more years, we really we haven't changed our resource levels in many years, yet the number of applications have gone up considerably. So this is something we have to look at as well. We also have to look at sort of the legal conditions for site plan approvals and update that and work and those haven't been updated in years. We updated the subdivision plan ones a couple of years ago, but site plan has not been looked at in a long time. And we've been looking at just even, we've had a generational turnover in the group, just in terms of level of experience. We've had a lot of people who were employed by the city at the time of amalgamation, many of whom are starting to retire in the next little while. I've already started and the trend in the next 2 or 3 years is quite considerable. So the average years of experience of the team is dropping. So we're looking at how we handle onboarding and new staff, file handoff practices as people change jobs. That's actually a strange bottleneck we found is when a lot of staff changing jobs is also creating a bit of the choke points in the process as well. So we're trying to work through that. And then we have to take the entire development review team and train them up on the new official plan and how to actually implement and work with it. So that we can give life to the official plan as the process goes forward. So that's a big part of the focus of 2022 as well. Okay, next slide, please. Right-of-way Heritage and Urban Design Group. It's a mix of different services. So if I can go to the next slide. Very interesting series of projects that were going on, some of which will mean a lot to some people around the table, I know for sure. One of the things that we've had, it's interesting that the high-rise projects always make the newspaper as the headline stories about what planning committee is talking about. But the highest number of complaints we get are actually about low-rise development and the quality of low-rise development. And it's very erratic. We've got some really good players in town who do really nice work, and we've got some people in town who I could use words that my mother wouldn't approve to describe them. So we're trying to it's hard to regulate something to the worst offender, but we are trying to improve our design guidelines so that people know a better handle on what we're expecting. So there are really real life issues that came up in the official plan discussions, such as, how the front of buildings relate to the street, room for trees, how sidewalks play into this, how front yard parking plays into this. And, we have existing urban design guidelines. We will do an interim update this year to reflect some of the things that came out of the official plan. And then when the zoning bylaw gets finished, there will also be a number of other changes that are likely to come through the consultations on the official plan, excuse me, on the zoning bylaw that will cause them to be further updated. And we need to do more work on this because, you know, we really do feel that a very large proportion of the growth in the infill will be actually in the low rise form. And that has to be done better. It's something we want to strive for. And as I said, I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. There are some beautiful projects. If you look at our Urban Design Award winners, there are some really nice low-rise design projects that win every year. But you know, it's an area, it's a pain point for some communities, and we want to see if we can do better in some of those. We've actually managed to get senior government funding for a public realm implementation in Stittsville for park. We are doing updated heritage studies in Centertown, and we originally had it as one project, but we've now just broken into two. So we're updating the Byward Market and Lowertown West Heritage Conservation Districts. And those are all mandatory because when the province passed Bill 108, it put a deadline on us about replacing old heritage districts that were adopted by the pre-amalgamation city of Ottawa with modern ones that are compliant with the new legislation. You know, we managed to get through the last couple of years without being challenged, but we are at risk if we don't replace them as a result of the legislative changes. So those are high priorities for us. We're updating the urban design review panel terms of reference. Part of it's operational improvements, but part of it's also to reflect the new urban design framework and the new official plan and the hierarchy that we introduced in that. It's again something that doesn't necessarily affect you until it's your front yard's dug up, but we with the rapid deployment of new fiber optic in many parts of the city, and you know, even 5G, which is not in the ground but through other use of other types of utility structures, we have to update all of our agreements with the major telecommunications companies. This is federally regulated. It's a very, very narrow range of powers the city has, extremely narrow. We can't deny access at any point in time to utilities, and if we try to, we'll be overruled by the federal government. But we do have arrangements about compensation to the city and the rules about how they dig up things, and that's the sort of thing we're trying to work through in the next little while. And then a fascinating project, a bit of a pet project that I'm really interested in, is the Carlington neighborhood, which is across from the Civic Hospital. It was one of the first post-war mass housing developments in all of Canada. It was veterans housing. It was built, and some people call them victory houses. It was actually one of the first three in all of Canada. I don't think it was the first, but it may have been the second. And we're doing a heritage review of this, and it's got a fascinating history in that area. And you know, a lot of the original character is still there from what was originally implemented. So we're looking at that area very closely right now as well. So that's the end of the slides in my presentation about really the 2022 work plan. I'm happy to just open the conversation, if the chair allows, to questions or comments on the 2022, but I'm also, you know, we're trying to frame our priorities for the next term of council, and I really would like to hear what people think. And I can wrap up with some of the things in our own mind, but I really want to, I want to just open the floor to hear what people think we should be focusing in on, having heard what I just told you.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Steve. So now is the time for questions from members of the committee. And as I mentioned at the start, so Charmaine Forgy and John Buck are also here for any questions that you might have. And feel free to, if you want to touch on what was just presented, the 2022 work plan, but also again, looking ahead forward to the next term of council and what we should be focused on. Not me, but the city when they move on. David Renfro.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Willis, thank you for joining tonight. We're all very fortunate to have you come in and speak to us. And on behalf of GOBA, you know, I've said it to a few of your staff members, and thank you. You know, in the middle of a pandemic, to have record numbers of permits, record numbers of planning files. We're really fortunate to have your team and to have you all going at such a consistent and backbreaking level. As a city, we're very fortunate. I know for our industry, we're very grateful. And thank you. And you know me, and I've been very critical of of the timing on development applications, but I also want to call a spade. Like I've had some tremendous files personally for clients in the last 12 months. So whatever you're doing, I think it's working. I think yeah, just from the association, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I don't want to take up everyone's bandwidth here, but as far as the 2022 work plan, I have a few questions. The first one is, you mentioned there's going to be a joint ARAC planning committee meeting on April 22nd. Do you have any indication on when the ministry will be providing the official plan recommendations? Or do we just know it's before April 8th?
So this is the official plan approval is different under the new legislation than the way it was last time. So if you were around, I wasn't here the last time. So Tim Mark is my main source of information about what happened last time. For those of you who don't know, Tim Mark is our municipal lawyer, and I often like to say he's one of the very best in all of Ontario. And we're very lucky to have him. He works very, very hard to represent council's positions whenever there's appeals. So, if you've ever met Tim, he's a very humble man and probably would be frustrated that I'm talking about him right now, but he actually is, an expert. Last time the minister basically listed a series, they would submit to us a series of topics that they were going to change if we didn't change on our own. Basically, that's the way it would have worked. So that's the easiest way to explain it. And so it gave council the opportunity to take a position on the approval. Under the new legislation, the minister just approves or not, and the minister can also just modify without even asking council's permission. So that's the way the new works. So we're going to get a notice of decision. We're not going to get a draft decision. We're not going to get things like we would have got in the past. The minister is just going to say, here it is. So whether the ministry, and ministry staff, in all fairness to them, they're in the middle of their approvals process and they're not showing us all their cards. Nor do I when I'm in the middle, when we're in the middle of a process when we're trying to develop our position. But ultimately the minister we'll get a note of a decision. So all indications are that it's in the next, I'd say it's the beginning of March. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it before the end of April. I really wouldn't, but it's in the ministry. It'll go into staff will get their work done, and then it goes to the minister's office, and then staff have no control about how quickly the minister makes a decision.
Thank you. I just wanted for the 2022, the Housing Affordability Task Force report came out. I know it's going to planning committee on March 10th. Whatever the end result is of that, I understand there's rumors that Premier Ford is going to put some of the recommendations in the legislation in March, and whatever that end result is, whatever that is. I'd love to see on the 2022 work plan that we have some type of monitoring mechanism put together that, of course, the GOBA is happy to assist with, just to try to continue to work on land supply and trying to help balance out the imbalance that's happening between supply and demand of land. So we as an association, we think housing affordability is going to be the biggest election issue for the province and for the local election. So if there's anything we can do, Steve, to help with the task force recommendations, whatever ones are approved, we're here, and we want to do anything we can to help promote more land supply, to help get shovels in the ground, and to help get more homes, to hopefully correct some of the market demand. I'll just keep going as we look into kind of rolling over 2022 to 2023, we'd like to see a little more synergy between the IMP, the TMP, and the DC bylaw. The way my understanding of the current schedule is, the TMP is actually not going to be finalized until after the DC bylaw has to be updated. So it's very critical for all of us, for the whole city, that we actually have the TMP finalized before the DC bylaw is finalized. So as we look at 2023, for sure, the DC bylaw is a critical item. I believe it has to be finalized by February 2024. And I also understand that the IMP needs to be, for anyone that doesn't know, the IMP is the infrastructure master plan, the TMP is the transportation master plan. Both of those elements are going to feed into the DC bylaw. And we strongly want to advocate that those should be on the 2023 work plan. GOBA would also like to see the Building Better, Smarter Suburbs to have a refresher done in 2023. Right now, that was a policy that was put forward 4 or 5 years ago. It did make a significant impact on the efficiency of lands, suburban lands. And we'd like to just have a refresher of that, just to make sure that a lot of the new policy that's come forward in the last 2 years is reflected in the BBSS. You know, that's traffic calming measures, roundabouts, utility requirements. We're seeing a bit of planning approval creep happening, where I'll just say that, you know, Transpo comes back at the last minute and says, we need a bus exit or a bus stop. And if there's a way we can control that better, I think it'll help the timing of an approval process. And again, we're happy to help through that entire process. And, you know, I think the last thing we'd love to see in 2023 is a way to monitor the objectives of the official plan. So we all know that, I believe we all know that there's a target of 60% intensification in the official plan. And we just want to make sure that we're achieving those goals. So we have to, as a city, all of us on this screen and all of our colleagues, we have to help the city achieve 60%. We have to do that through missing middle intensification. We have to do that with the zoning bylaw, and we have to find a way to get more urban infill, whether that's as of right or through a planning process. And the repercussions, if we don't, is it means we have to have more suburban land, which does not align with some of the climate goals. So these are just sorry, it's just a bit of a brain dump. I'm happy to articulate or clarify anything I've said, but those are hopefully some things that you could take away to help next year.
Yeah, I'll do a really quick response because I just still want to give all of the committee members a chance to speak, but really quickly on a couple of things. Monitoring is a really big part of what we're trying to figure out for the new official plan. And again, it was something that was discussed during the approval. So part of our implementation strategy is a new monitoring strategy, and we are looking at some new tools for monitoring and doing a better linkage to some of our own internal resources to do that. We are looking at upping our game on our annual reports and trying to get better data. Some of it, you know, it's I'm going to have a serious discussion with council about how we set that up and resource that. But we have some ambitions of our own on this. Housing Affordability Task Force. I'm hearing the same rumors that there will be new legislation in March coming from the province. I don't know what's in it. Our report, by the way, if any of you are interested, is live now. You can see what our recommendation on the city's position is on the Housing Affordability Task Force, and we'll be going to committee next week on that. Building better, smarter suburbs is definitely on the refresh list, something to look at, and which infrastructure master plan is very much on track. A little slight delay, but it's very much on the timelines we originally said. Transportation master plan, we're struggling right now because the length of the pandemic and the implications on the broader transportation network makes it really hard for us to figure out how we start and do a measurement. Like, when do we know the traffic's back to normal, quote unquote, and what is normal, in order to do a baseline measurement to know how the new plan is actually going to work? I mean, we're still in a lot of uncertainty on that. I'd love to believe that by September we'll know what new normal looks like. It won't be the same as what it was going in. I hope we were there. But you know, we still have major employers in the city that don't have their staff going into the office at all, and some significant, I think, permanent changes to patterns have happened as a result of the pandemic. So it's a tough one, and also we'll see the priorities of the new council too. So we've decided to put everything on pause right now and then come back early in the next term of council with our policy report and really a kind of a refresh work plan based on where we're at then. Because I think it's very, very, you know, we were going to go live with the consultations on the policy report of the TMP, but then it was right in the middle of the protests, and we decided the city's not fair to actually have that consultation at that point in time. So now we're looking at, it's like, let's just take a step back. We'll continue to collect input based on the online parameters, but we'll go back out and consult in the new year, get the policy work done, and then figure out exactly what the trajectory is. We may have to do an interim update on some matters for the DC bylaw update because it's mandatory by law in 2024. But I can't yet tell you how. We haven't got that all figured out yet. I think I covered everything you meant.
Always do. You always do.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, David. Our next speaker is our Vice Chair, Mohammed Al-Rafai.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Steve, for your presentation. Very thorough. Great to kind of get a sense of everything that you have on your plate for this coming year. I will make a comment, and just in the sense that I noticed I've been always looking through these presentations of where long-term growth and sustainability, ecology, and climate kind of fit in as kind of a major pillar, let's say, of how the city structures itself and structures its business. And I'm struggling to see that show up in a lot of these presentations. It does, like I know that it was referenced, the climate change master plan is part of the 2022 goals for Department of Economic and Long-Term Planning. But I somehow feel like it'd be great to know where else this is a topic, and this is a subject that crosses all departments. It's part of building code, it's part of planning, it's part of urban design, and it really, part of economics, obviously. So I wonder if there's any kind of talk amongst the city of really developing it and its own department, so that it's a topic that can become an umbrella to, or really span and branch into a lot of the other affairs of city. But I don't know, is that something that you have on your plate for the next year? Is this under discussion or debate?
So one of the reasons why I don't talk so much about this is it goes back to our corporate governance. The Environment Committee has the standing for all of the climate change related issues. And so this committee isn't linked to, it's a corporate governance thing. It's a thing that Chair Moffat, I'm sure, would want to talk about for next term of council. But I did bring some notes because I knew this question was going to come up, even though it's not directly within the scope of your mandate. So I can give you the 2022 work plan in terms of climate change initiatives, and then I'll answer your question about how we're corporately arranged. So right now, we passed the climate change master plan strategy. We have a number of programs underway. We have the Better Homes Ottawa loan program, which I signed the very first homeowner got their agreement signed today. I'm actually really pleased we got that. It's a really big program that we're doing. The Better Buildings Ottawa strategy and the high performance development standards are going to planning committee next week. We have a municipal renewal and retrofit program for energy retrofit and civic buildings that's taking off and being framed. We have a corporate electric vehicle policy, so we're pushing more and more towards the electrification of our own fleet, which is easy to do for light duty vehicles, but we're trying to pilot into medium duty vehicles now. And then, there's certain things like snowplows and fire trucks and ambulances that we're going to, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm not the expert on that, but those are hard ones to do if you went down the road. But we're looking at, for example, my, John's staff who do inspections on construction sites. We're looking at piloting some electric vehicles in medium duty, the types of things that have to be able to drive construction sites. So this is a new thing for us. We're working into that space. I talked about the climate resiliency strategy. We have put an advocacy package out to both senior levels of government, a whole bunch of new things. John and I were talking earlier today about things that are coming in the 2024 building code that will be very significant. We don't know exactly how they're going to land, but they will be big for us. We're looking at climate budget for the city, which is actually reporting how every department actually, what it does in terms of its own climate GHG emissions, and what each department is actually doing in their strategy to manage that. So we were going to pilot it in our department in Ottawa Public Health 2 years ago, then a pandemic hit. So luckily, we've actually, in the meantime, managed to find a way of actually reporting it corporate wide. So we're working on that now internally, and then each department does it. And the way it's been within the city right now is our department has had the lead on the framework plan, but now may sound strange, but we're now trying to get champions and people designated within each individual department, so that each department will then execute and deliver on their own, and then have a corporate coordination through the corporate energy office, perhaps, or some other vehicle like an interdepartmental group. It's creating new departments is actually really hard, and we don't do it that often, but having the interdepartmental coordination gets it exactly the point you're making. It has to happen. It has to be corporate, and that's what we're trying to work on right now. As I said, we have a brand new corporate, it's only about 2 years old, a new corporate energy office that actually measures what we're spending on energy. It's a finance oriented function, but it's a really good, it's a good way of collecting data and knowing how we're doing it. So it'll evolve. We're getting there. We've made a lot of strides in the last couple of years, for sure. And we have more to do, much more to do in the External Council. And on the
Thank you.
ecology side, just you mentioned the ecology side, I should have Nick Stowe here in. And actually, Chair, maybe we have Nick in as a guest speaker in the next session, just to talk about some of the things we're doing on the ecological front. I mean, I can't begin to be as eloquent as Nick is on that, and he and his team do a lot of work. We've done an enormous amount of work on the forestry side of files. New standards for thresholds for distinctive tree protection. We've hired 2 infill foresters who work on infill development applications to try to get trees saved. We don't have as much luck yet as I want, but we've had so many wins in the last year that in previous years we would never have had, because this team is working extremely hard. And I'm really impressed with some of the sites we've got redesigns on to save trees more than it. We're not where I want to be yet, but boy, we're a lot further than we were. So that's still a high priority for me. It's a very personal concern for me to try to do more on that front. So we'll see about getting Nick in just to give a bit of presentation on some of the stuff he's doing.
That'd be great.
Anything else,
So
Mohammed?
that's my biggest. Yeah, that was my biggest comment. I can kind of pick up later. I'll leave that, but it's always like from our perspective, a practicing architect, we look at a lot of the desires for deep energy kind of studies, deep energy retrofits, and all the staging and all of the analysis that's going to have to happen before any action's taken. And we're looking at things that, targets for 2040. It's 2022. And there's not, to me, some of the precursors to the action that are happening right now are not happening fast enough. There's not enough of them. And the 2040 targets are we're going to miss a lot of these targets if we don't start to see some kind of a bit more a little bit more crisis, let's say, in how we understand how we need to bring in that dialogue into everything that we do. And again, it's understandable that every department needs to have its own action plan, and every department needs to have a champion that can kind of look and drive within that department what it needs to do to improve. But somehow it feels like, and again, I don't understand how it works within the city, and maybe Scott at another time can kind of brief me on that, but it feels like one of the pillars that we're looking at in the planning and the growth of the city has to be something related to the environment, something related to sustainable growth.
Yeah, I'll try to really just wrap up really quickly. So as it relates to private development, we're always limited by the powers the province gives us under legislation, how much we can actually regulate. And the province does not regulate anything that happens within the walls of a building. It's really only on the outside of a building we have any powers. So the building code upgrades are going to be really, really critical to see some of the things we really want to see happen on the private development side. As it relates to the municipal building stock, where lots of good internal discussions going, unlike the federal government, we can't shut entire buildings down and then do a deep retrofit from other. The types of services we have, are quite continuous, and a lot of communities are very, very dependent on those services. So it's actually a lot harder for us to do deep energy retrofits for an entire building at once. So we're dealing with it in segments and improvements, and it's not ideal, but it is like, we can't shut down a fire station. We can't shut down an ambulance post. We can't shut down a rec center or a pool for these long retrofits. It causes a lot of community pain when we do. So we're trying to hack that problem. I wish I had a better answer for this, but I know that there's not a single building project happens where we don't have an internal energy team look at what are all the opportunities when something's opened up to go in and make improvements. That actually happens on every project that have a building side. So it's just a question of how can we leverage it up too, as well. So I'm not going to dispute your point about the urgency is absolutely right. I agree. It's just, but it is a lot more challenging with the building stock we actually have.
All right, thank you. Wow, we appreciate it. I was just about to go to Tom Moss, but there he is. Coming back, Tom.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thanks, Steve, for an excellent presentation. I could tell by just the way you were talking and how proud you are of the work that was done by your team during the pandemic and how enthusiastic you are going forward. So thank you for that and to your team. I have just two topics that are small in nature. You talked about the digital 3D modeling, and I'm wondering whether you plan to use that not only for the planning purposes, but also for evaluations by developers, particularly the problems that you talked about with regards to the low rise. Is this part of the planning? And do you see that, being eliminating to more as much as one can with regards to some of the challenges you face with the developers?
Yeah, it's a good question on the low rise because, we tend to deal with a lot of smaller players and not very sophisticated players. So, I think the role that we see is we're getting the digital model built. We're going to use it first in our own secondary planning projects. I mean, Carolyn knows how hard Peter Giles worked on the Bank Street Height and Character Study using SketchUp, and Peter put lots of personal hours in just to make that a very good visual tool. This thing will take it to a whole new level. If we had this tool in place, it would have made that work a lot easier. And then we see it then being applied to major redevelopment of a Westgate Mall type project, just something on the big scale. How far I can roll it down, I don't know yet, but we kind of have a staged play out of how we're going to work with this too. I'd love to get to that stage. I really would. I mean, I think having a meeting like this and being able to take a building and tilt it around and show everybody from different angles and pull out and take a look at it in the context of the buildings around is so much better than looking at the building with sort of artist renderings of what's going on behind.
And particularly if you got challenges with regards to your bylaws or requirements or regulations to show the applicant the issues, right?
Yep.
A picture's worth 1,000 words, so to speak. Right?
Yep, I agree.
My second one was you talked about virtual engagements versus in person. Is it part of your team moving forward that you're going to be looking at more virtual engagements based on the ease and the cost reductions to the city with, and also the less stress on citizens having to actually present themselves at City Hall and all of the aspects of getting there?
I'm gonna ask Charmaine to answer because she's in the lead of looking at that issue. Charmaine, if you don't mind taking this question, please.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Steve, and thank you for the question. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I am looking into it, and I can't speak about committee and council, how they will be continue to function, but I can speak about our development application meetings, policy meetings. So I am doing a business case right now for, you're absolutely right, Tom. It's convenient for residents, I've been advised, and also it saves real cost reduction in staff overtime, in renting a hall. You need someone to get it's all of those pieces. And mentioning about climate change, everyone driving into the car to go to some one location as well. So absolutely looking into that and doing a case so we continue to do it. And also we have to ensure that the legislation allows us to do it in the Planning Act, that it allows us to continue with the virtual world, because that was something that was when it first happened, the pandemic. Of course, we could get around any rules at the beginning just to keep things going. But no, I really appreciate your thoughts. If you have any thoughts about how we could, but other things, benefits, if you could please send them to me, Tom, I'd really appreciate it.
Just as an add-on to that, and I'm sure you folks are aware of it, the Ontario government is currently looking at developing a digital ID in order for citizens using their mobile devices to be able to use their devices to obtain government provincial services and pay fees. Do you see the city of Ottawa moving in that same direction once the Ontario government has pretty well put a framework along a digital ID wallet?
Yeah, and that's very much out of the scope of our department. We have a separate department in the city called Innovative Client Services, and they're the group that runs 311, a lot of the information that you get online as well. They are looking at, I'm sure they're looking at things like that, but I really don't know where they're at, and I'm really completely unqualified.
Yeah, no, but it could be a topic for the new council members.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Shannon Bassett.
Hi, thank you very much for your comprehensive update. I had 2 questions. The first was you mentioned a climate change resiliency plan, and I wanted to understand what steps have been taken to integrate that into your infrastructure plan or open space urban design plans with both new development as well as infill development, thinking about the idea that these can be at once integrative and ecologically performative. And the second question, I believe, Court, at our last meeting in November, mentioned that there were, I think, a few design excellence competitions. He did not say where, but I wanted to understand if with the change in council, those would be still undertaken. And again, to go back to my first question, what are the opportunities for implementing best case practices in, let's say, stormwater management or ecological planning in both open space design, urban design, layered with achieving climate resiliency. And I use as an example the Toronto waterfront that's doing that right now.
Yeah.
Or Waterfront Toronto.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. And I know they work well. I worked for them for about 10 years on several of their projects as well, including the Don River project. First of all, on the climate resiliency plans, it's very focused on the city's own operations, but the energy evolution plan does talk about how we roll this into other areas. And the new official plan does have some new guidelines, for example, about managing for risks of stormwater. There's actually higher standards for rain events that we actually have to plan around, and identifying hazard areas in the new official plan. And I'm not the expert to go through that, but I can probably, again, find some more information for you. The climate resiliency plan, we have a lot of vulnerable infrastructure with climate change. I mean, think about our water supply system and where our plants, inevitably are located on river fronts. The 2 major floods we've had in the last number of years did show some of the issues there. In the rural area, you see stormwater culverts being blown out at a higher frequency with more intense, very, very localized rain events. So we are looking at how our new infrastructure works. We're also looking at low impact development guidelines, LID, which is really new ways of, and you're probably familiar with the term, I don't need to tell you about this, but for the benefit of others, LID is about how to more integrate stormwater into how a site is actually designed. I mean, the basic rules right now are that post-development stormwater runoff from site can't exceed what it was prior to development. So people have to get more creative about how to manage it. So you can't just dump more and more water on the street. But we are looking at low impact design guidelines. We're looking at different types of softer infrastructure, which, I'm a big fan of, but the people who maintain it don't always love it. So, and Ottawa doesn't always have the best soil conditions for some of that as well, because we have a lot of clay, which makes some of that harder to do in certain, or rock. In the Toronto area where they have more till underneath it, it actually works a lot better than it does here. So definitely things we're trying to do. In terms of design competitions, we were looking at a joint design competition with the NCC on a certain parcel of land, but I can tell you what's happened in the last couple of months has changed what we're doing on that, and that's on hold because there's a broader discussion going on with the Government of Canada about who is responsible for what. So that's what Court was alluding to at the last meeting for now. I think I've got through what you asked, and again, forgive me if I haven't. I'm happy to answer further.
Was that a waterfront parcel or?
No, it was a significant public realm parcel that one might have seen trucks on recently. So things are changing.
Trucks. Okay.
Yeah, things are changing, and are what I would have wanted to do a year ago. I'm not going to deny things. We have to go do a pause and think about some of our projects.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Corlia.
Yes, hi, thank you. First of all, because due to the presentation, and I also agree that the effort to maintain the city open during the pandemic makes me very proud. I was very happy, and we all recognize the effort that it was done. I also want to say that it's a relief to see that try to integrate the public and the government, like we are doing now, to reach a better vision of the process. It's good. I think that these type of committee are great, and it's always a way to improve the communication and the process, but I think it's a good beginning. Talking about the green part, I agree with everything that everyone was saying. I think that the measure needs to be done more urgently, like help to improve to the homeowners and the developers to accelerate the implementation of a more energy efficient construction. For example, not allowing so many square meters of asphalt roof to replace previously green space, like we had here in Barkhaven and in Manotick. Big buildings, big asphalt roof, force them to put green roof, because that were green space with oxygen and they were absorbing water. Now they have to have, I suppose, a better water management. So many square meters transform. It used to be much more green. And of course, I support what we call the decentralization of the city, which is integrate the outside village inside the city. It's not decentralized, it's integrate what was outside inside. And about the digitalization, I think that all the industry of the architects are going that way, and that's inevitable because it's helped to do clash detection and problems like stack homes or whatever, to see the problems before going to the site. And that helps also to build better. But I'm really happy with all the effort and everything you were doing.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I know the green roof issue is part of, we're doing more work on it. It's easier in the residential sector than in the industrial commercial sector, but it's certainly something we're trying to make some progress on, because I agree there's a lot of room for improvement.
All right. Thank you. Carolyn McKenzie.
Great, thank you. And thank you very much, Steve, for your for being here this evening. Your time is extremely valuable, it goes without saying. So really appreciate you coming here and speaking to us this evening. Just to pick up briefly on the comment you were talking about the 3D modeling, you mentioned you and I had conversation about that. You know, again, just to reinforce that, yes, goes without saying, and I've said it before, I said it at Planning Committee, how much I appreciated the work that Peter Giles and colleagues on your planning department did on the Bank Street study. But what I would say, yes, we did some modeling there, but the modeling that was done by the city, I don't believe was the piece that made this, you know, the big contribution. I think we were using SketchUp, or he was using SketchUp. And if I'm not mistaken, at that point, it was a version of SketchUp that, you know, the license expired halfway through, so we no longer had access to. And I'm not saying that to throw stones. I'm just saying we've got to up our game. I'd be interested, Mohammed, you know, to hear from you how, and as Cora's comments alluded to, you know, just now, I can only imagine that those tools are just becoming standard practice. Perhaps, as you say, too expensive for, you know, a very small developer who's doing you know, knocking down something and putting up a, you know, a duplex or something like that. But for anything that's going on, certainly anything that goes to UDRP, anything that goes on a main street, anything that goes with anything of any, you know, real substance, I just can't imagine why we're not going there right now and saying we've got to have that. We've got to see how these buildings are going to land. We're talking a lot about upping our game in terms of urban design. I would just really strongly encourage, I mean, unless I'm mistaken about the practicality of that, I just think we need to go there sooner rather than later. So anyway, so that was one thing. I guess And I guess another comment I would make, and Mohammed, you mentioned it, you were talking about sort of trade-offs between, so planning issues and climate, ecology, social, economic, all of those kind of things. I would encourage, and I assume it's within it should be within the planning department's mandate to actively be developing a modeling tool to weigh and the trade-offs between those important elements. You can't model everything in detail, but I think for some of the big questions that I mentioned it before, how do we intensify at the same time that we grow our urban canopy? You mentioned the word luck. I think you used a word twice earlier when you were talking about saving trees. I hate to think that it's luck that's going to get us there, and I don't think you meant that. I mean, well, maybe you did. I don't know, but I can't think that that's our strategy. Luck cannot be part of our strategy. I mean, I'll take luck, sure, but as a bonus. But that just simply can't be our strategy. We've got to figure out how to make both of those things work. And the only way, in my mind, the only way to do that is to think about those two issues at the same time and really understand how do we solve that issue? What are the specifics? Put the rhetoric on, about saving trees and intensifying and land supply and all those things, and really get down to the nuts and bolts of how are we going to do that. So I would encourage much greater emphasis to tackling that. I think if we don't do that, we are to a certain extent going to be relying on luck to figure out how those pieces go together. And I guess, and I'll just finish off by pleading once again, for greater advance distribution of slide decks for this committee. This is maybe the third time I've asked, or I've pointed out that we're getting them, in my view, a little bit too late to really properly. I mean, I really appreciate your time tonight and going through all of this. And you walked us through significant detail. But I like to be able to, maybe I'm just a slow thinker, but I like to be able to have a bit of time to reflect and to think about these things and feel a bit more prepared in coming to committee. So I would really plead with you to try and bring materials to this committee earlier than what we've been seeing. But
I'll second that as well.
Yeah. But I know that your department is under tremendous pressure and has been delivering. So I'm not unaware of the context in which you're working, but anyway, I'll leave it there. But thank you again.
Yeah, just really quick. Well, we'll work with City Clerk's office. They're the one who do the logistics on the timing, so we'll talk to them about that and material as well. I know this presentation. I'll have to backtrack to find out when you actually got it, because I know we've had it available for a while, but there are things like translation and other sorts of things that come in between the steps. So we also have to do accessibility checks and other sorts of things. So we'll have to backtrack on this, but we'll look into that one specifically. Urban design, you and I just happen to agree with each other again on this issue that I'd really want better digital tools. And I know the type of work that Mohammed's group, for example, I know his firm really well. I know what they can do, and I wish I could do what his firm could do. And I'm trying to get the tools in place. So, I mean, in my dream situation, Mohammed calls me up and says, I'm representing a private developer. I need to go a data capture of this area of the city so I can insert my design into this. Can you just, I'll be fair, he's going to buy from me the data of the context, and then he puts his building in, and then the software allows us both to be able to take a look at this. And we agree with you. You had exactly the same. You said exactly what I would have said, is about where we have to make sure the types of things that go to urban design review panel, the types of things in major policy projects, those areas. I just agree 100% with what you said, and I want to get there. We'll get there as fast as we can, because I just agree. And on the trees, I think I used if I said luck, I probably meant that I've been lucky I've been getting resources to do this. I think I have to thank Councillor Chair Moffat for his support in getting us resources to do more work on this. And resources across this organization are precious to get, and our department put its priority in trees. Like the asks we had in this budget were in trees. And your talk about trade-offs, I think this is one of those very valuable discussions when we get into zoning and front yards and trees. That's a real conversation this city has to have with the community, with the development community. We have to have that conversation. You know, I see some beautiful infill developments that do a really sensitive job, and then I see ones, shown one the other day where it's built almost to the curb, no sidewalk, no front yard, no tree, and the building is filled right to the whatever the zoning envelope allowed, and it's like, okay, you know, that's not really what we want. You know, I realize that that's what's allowed under law, and the Ontario laws are not exactly strong to help us get this stuff, but I think that's a conversation. And I'm challenging my own staff to think about things like, what are our front yard rules because of this problem being persistent? So you're right. I think showing trade-offs when we get to those very, very specific zoning issues will be a good way of describing it. And then ultimately, if we could roll that out more further. I mean, I know it's not exactly what you said, but one of the controversial elements in next week's high performance development guidelines, and I'll acknowledge to the group that David's with doesn't agree with us on, is we are actually asking for energy modeling earlier in the development process for projects. So that's, I'm not going to put David on the spot. It's just a point of disagreement on this. So it's
Feel free. But
yeah.
Can I actually add one thing, Carolyn? I think every builder I know values trees. So I think GOBA all agrees to have trees, and I'd love to work with the community groups and with the politicians and with staff that if there's ever contentious trees, like there should be a simple compensation agreement that we could all agree on. That, I don't know, just I live on Roosevelt Avenue, and there was one huge tree that was a huge issue, and the developer saying, well, I got to put my pipe in this location. And then like I remember Councillor Leeper got involved, and like all my neighbors were so fired up, and they're asking me to make a statement. I'm like, I can't, as president of GOBA, I can't come out on this, even though I fundamentally wish that developers just came and say, you know what, I'll compensate 5 trees for that one tree or some. There has to be a way that we can take some of that that confrontation out of the process. And I know GOBA is willing to do that for sure, because every developer I've talked to they know the value of trees, like we for oxygen, for the environment, and aesthetics. It looks good. So there has to be a way we can find a balance between where the pipes go and to meet the separation for those, and where trees can go. Like let's have that open dialogue. And I actually don't want to challenge Mr. Willis on high performance standards, but I will say energy modeling, I'm happy to, Steve. I just don't know how it's going to end for me. So, you know, I will say energy modeling, you can't finalize energy modeling until you know all your utility requirements, your Enbridge gas, all your hydro, like where your hydro locations go. Like I'm someone that builds high rise, I build mid rise. Like I know the process, and you typically don't have all those details at site plan. So again, we'll find a way to work together or disagree, whatever it ends up being. But I do know, working on Enbridge savings by design guidelines for the project they built on Main Street for the corners on Main, we could not even fundamentally come to the energy modeling until we figured out what type of window it was and all the other elements, what type of furnace system we had, and what type of air intake was being in to meet the building code requirements, because we had to exceed the building code by 25%. So I'm happy to work with John's group, and we'll find a way. John's heard me being vocal on this at steering committee. We're happy to work with you guys. We just think it's you're just adding another step in the process, which is delays. For the record, if Mohammed agreed with me, just for the record.
No, I did not. I agreed. I think it's a great step. I think it's fundamental. I think it's really, we need to change the way we move forward and understand the economics of growth. And if that means that we have to factor in these elements that they're not afterthoughts, and which is great that it's becoming earlier and earlier in the process. We start thinking about sustainability from concept. Municipalities should start thinking, about that also. And perhaps part of any procurement project for the city has to put in that there are feasibility studies to analyze before we even get going. What are our options to do better and to surpass our sustainability goals and expectations? So
I appreciate
again, the earlier we do this, we have to do
but
this.
Carolyn does have the floor, and there are 2 people with their hands up. So
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that we're staying on track.
It's great stuff, good stuff from the city side.
I won't, thanks. I won't be too much longer. So I think all this discussion, it just reinforces in my mind the importance of it, that we don't just have community groups, and I'm here representing the FCA, having bilateral conversations with planning, or GOBA having bilateral conversations with planning. To me, you need to get all of these players together so that we can have real conversations and try and crack these very difficult nuts so that we can make some progress. Otherwise we've got rhetoric to a certain extent. I'm not saying we all have our rhetoric to a certain extent and our interests, but I think it just reinforces to me that the only way to do it is to really get down to some brass tacks with that. And David, I'll just say that there was a letter sort of during the official plan process that GOBA had issued, I believe. I don't remember the details, but at one point there was an addendum and it had a table, and it was comparing costs, and it had line items of all these items, and they were costed out, all these additional costs. Whether I went through and I said, yeah, that's reasonable or not, I thought that was super useful in the sense that it actually gave me insight into what GOBA saw and the specifics of what were driving additional costs for suburban builds, outside of the urban core versus intensification. It actually gave me very specifics to say what those cost drivers were. And if you had I don't know, you probably had about 30 line items there, you could look at that and zone in right on what were the most significant cost drivers. And what that tells me, immediately I go to those and say, how can we reduce those costs? If there are 5 things that were adding such significant cost to the build, and these were comments on what the official plan policies were going to add to your building costs, let's zone in on those. What are the biggest cost drivers, and let's see what we can do to fix those. So and that's to me what the conversation we need to get people who have knowledge and expertise to figure out what those solutions are to those types of items. Anyway, I'll leave it there, and I'll leave it for others to chime in. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Aileen Duncan.
Hi, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve, for the great presentation and such good work this year for your departments. So one thing I wanted to raise, and it dovetails really well with many things that have been raised tonight, is about whether you guys are looking at embodied carbon as part of the way that you're thinking about energy efficiency and the building process. And so for anyone watching this now or later who maybe doesn't know what that is, it would be the carbon produced through the extraction, the manufacturing, and the transportation of the building materials. And in the short term, this is a huge source of carbon emissions. So like over 12 years, you're looking at like a 60 to 75%, especially with concrete as a big construction tool. So I would encourage, I'm wondering if that is something that you are looking at. I'm sure you're probably a little bit limited in what can be done in terms of regulation, but especially with, trying to get that signal out to markets that kind of these are things that we should be measuring and moving towards reduction of.
It's a very interesting point. I know in terms of city projects, these are conversations we're having, and I'm really encouraged to see some of the changes coming in the building code. John knows more than I do about mass timber construction and how, from an embodied carbon perspective, it's a lot better story than some of the things we're doing. Under the Planning Act, there's actually a line in the Planning Act that says we are not allowed to tell anybody about what building materials they use. It's actually explicitly written in there in the provincial legislation. So we have no say in that at all. It is provincially, it's linked back to the extent that is regulated by any government. The building code has some requirements in there, but we're actually prohibited. There's very few places in the planning that says you can't, municipality, you can't, but it actually under site plan, it actually says that. So it's, there's a good and bad about that. I mean, what's good about it is architects, many of you around here are architects or work closely. You get to have the creativity of your design and no city bureaucrats telling you what materials you pick. That's a good thing. But on the flip side, this issue of embodied carbon is a very legitimate issue. And I think the building industry more broadly is going to have to tackle this without local government really driving the bus on it. But not that it isn't a legitimate issue. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I've seen other municipalities doing, not necessarily in Ontario, but is starting to ask for the amount of how much would the embodied carbon be in terms of the construction, not putting a cap on it or anything, but just starting to get people thinking about that this is something that needs to be calculated and known. Thanks
Yeah,
so much.
some provinces like BC have much stronger rules than we have in Ontario. So listen, I'm not going to disagree with you, but our hands are very tied by the legislation.
Thank you. Shannon, again.
Just to that point, I mean, I think it's worth looking into implementing more performance-based zoning or incentivized zoning that might address some of the issues that Eileen brought up. And just on the point, I think that Carolyn brought up about modeling. I know because I'm trained as an urban designer and teach urban design, but recently in 2020 attended an ESRI GIS conference in Toronto, and there is a program or software that literally does 3D modeling that you can plug in such variables. So certainly offline I can find that, but I do know that there is such usable, user-friendly software that does achieve that.
Yeah, and actually, Charmaine, again, maybe a follow-up list, maybe we get Randall's group, someone from them to come and do a demonstration of some of the things we're working on. We actually have a really great team in our geospatial and analytics group. They've again upped their game. They use a lot of Esri products right now, and they're testing a lot of new things. Not the biggest group, for a city our size, but and they're also like, you would be amazed at what they get drawn into corporately. They're not just my department, they're in my department, but they're a corporate resource. So during the floods, for example, they were doing live geospatial information being provided to the teams on the ground to help them manage it, including, where are the electrical supply areas that need to be shut off, all sorts of stuff. So it's a small but mighty team. And, they do really cool work. I just love watching. They come to me every once in a while. This is the latest thing we're working on. So I love it, but maybe we can get them in to do a demo of some of the stuff they're doing.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Shannon. Just a heads up, Carolyn just messaged me. She had to leave for another meeting, so she's left our meeting here tonight. Mohammed, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick follow-up, because I did hear a few comments come up. Both David and Carolyn kind of referring to the affordability of, the affordability factor. And, obviously there is, that's a critical part of how we are able to kind of allow people to enjoy enjoy living in a city like Ottawa with accessible spaces and also accessible ownership of homes or accessible rents. So that's kind of great. It's a great city for that. I will just counterbalance that there is also kind of, we have to balance quality with that cost. So it's not, our driver can't just be to kind of reduce costs, because with that, inevitably, when you're talking about reducing costs and when you're talking about reducing times to approvals, times to construction, that's inevitably going to lead to the drop in the third part of that triangle, quality always drops. So whether it's quality of how the developments have an impact on our environment, or how, like you mentioned, the quality of urban infills that you're critical of, Steve. These are, I'm sure there's an economic, reasoning for why that building looks the way it does. However, is that what we want? And so how do we find that balance? And again, it just can't be about cost all the time. It can't be about speed all the time. I think we have to find a way to play a long game. And just, back to Eileen's point about embodied carbon and how we start to kind of look at that, I think it would be through the cities. I mean, it starts off obviously federally, provincially, and then down to the city, but the city really putting out guidelines that, again, much maybe potentially to the disappointment of David, might add another level of complexity to project of a certain scale. A project of a certain scale have to meet certain benchmarks, certain targets, and meet and be able to achieve certification. And you don't have to look very far. There are in Canada, very progressive municipalities that ask more of developments, ask more of builders, city builders to contribute, to other things beyond developing stock for the market, but they're actually asking for a long-term legacy from these developments. But also globally, I'm sure there's also a lot of other cities in Europe. I know that we're looking at cities in Europe that are adopting passive house standards, for example, are really encouraging the use of passive house certifications for projects above a certain scale. And I think something like that will inevitably lead to at least a conversation and awareness. Once you have supply, once you have demand, there'll be supply in the market, and these things start to drop in price. Expertise becomes present, but it's hard for developers to take that initiative on their own. People need to know about it. Consumers need to want it, and I think the city really plays a big part as a big player in putting out some of these guidelines, whether it's building code related or whether it's I know that, for example, Vancouver, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but as of last year, as of this year, any new developments in Vancouver, residential developments, cannot use gas-fired appliances. That's it. It's electric from now on, carbon neutral, home heating. So that's something that the city put in place. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are not happy because it is driving potentially cost, but that is short term. We're talking about a short term play here. At some point, that is going to become cost neutral, but it's also going to be beneficial to be value added to our overall sustainability goals. So I think city really has a crucial role to play to setting the benchmark really high. And again, just playing the long game.
Yeah, I mean, quickly going back to, there's a huge difference between the laws in Ontario and BC, like enormous difference. As I said, I have in my inbox, I have 2 lawyers' letters that tell me we have no powers to do some of the things that we're proposing to do next week. I have 2 different lawyers in Ottawa who don't think we have any power to do it. We disagree. Our lawyers are prepared to take them on some of these, but we can only go so far. We cannot control what happens inside a building other than as it relates to the building code, and the building code in Ontario, and John reminds me, is about safety. First and foremost, building safety, and it's about life safety issues and structural safety and all those sorts of things. And there are certain energy requirements that are in the code that will in time will change and enhance. But the building code is a yes/no approval. It's there's no variations or discretion really. Ultimately, in this, it's very focused on are you compliant with the code or not, with some variations of how you get there. The municipalities take a big role in this, and we are trying to push with what powers we do have, what we can do. There's also another dynamic, not just law. It's also about some of those cities. So I often get into conversations with people just around the dinner table. So this is a very real fact that costs of construction between Toronto and Ottawa are not that different. In fact, it's a little bit more expensive to build per square foot in Ottawa than Toronto. Toronto has a bigger labor market and better access to material. So it's probably about 5 to 10% cheaper per square foot to build in Toronto than it is in Ottawa if you're building the same thing. But the revenues per square foot and building sales, whether it doesn't matter which form of building, are somewhere between 60 and 100% more in Toronto than they are in Ottawa. So there's a really big difference in terms of the gap and the ability that anybody doing a project and what they're willing to contribute back to the community based on the very raw economics. So, and we don't like to talk about it, but it actually does play out. So Toronto, with property values as high as they are in Toronto, and with the developers knowing they can sell those units for so much more than they can be a bit more generous than they're going to be here, especially when they have to get support from lenders and financiers for their projects and expected rate of return. So there's more wiggle room in Toronto and Vancouver. Dave, are my numbers about right? I mean, you do this every single day. This is based on what I've heard.
No, so I mean, when you look at and again, sorry, Chair, I'm going to take a minute on this. When you look at a pro forma, I mean, you only have 4 variables. You have the cost of the land, you have your soft costs, which is getting all your approvals, your finance costs. You have your hard costs, which is what Steve just talked about, and then in administration. Okay, and that's like staff. So that's a pro forma. It's not rocket science. So the only variable that changes from project to project is your soft costs of interest, how long it takes to get the approvals, and the cost of the land. Like your administration, every developer, they're within 1 or 2% of the same administration costs. And your hard costs, to Steve's point, it's concrete's the cost of concrete, the cost of concrete, the cost of a 2x4 is the cost of a 2x4. So I know for us as a, call it the industry, like we're always trying to get quicker approvals because that's one of the variables that we can try to save money and pass on to home buyers.
But I don't just to go back, I'm not trying to debate Mohammed, because again, his heart's, his heart's absolutely in the right place, and I agree with the intent here. And I think, we are trying to do it. As I said, we're using our powers. And I think groups like the Urban Design Review Panel bring a lot of these questions. They're actually asking questions about what materials are being used and how to get those quality issues. So, I think the bigger projects, we have more negotiating room. So that's for real. So.
All right, thanks, Steve. David, you're next anyway.
Yeah, I'll be real quick on this, Chair. I know it's getting late for everyone. I just wanted to mention what Mohammed talked about. I think there's always compromises for all of us to find a way to make this work for all parties. And one thing maybe, Steve, I can suggest is when the zoning bylaw gets updated, maybe there's opportunities with site plan exemption. Calgary put out a report probably 4 or 5 years ago where they basically had a development standard, call it a zoning box, and basically said, if you achieve these basic zoning setbacks, building height, building articulation, we can add energy efficiency at a certain level. We could work with John, like maybe it's 10% above the building code for energy efficiency, whatever it is, X amount of trees in the front yard. It's an as of right approval. So just say it's a 4-plex, or maybe it's a 6-plex, or whatever the case. If you meet these if you check all these boxes, you achieve energy efficiency, you have soft landscape in the front, whatever we all want to come up with that checks everyone's boxes, it's site plan exempt. Why that's a win for all of us is maybe we can get some of these extra things that communities want and neighborhoods want, but the developer is going to save on the cost of a site plan. They're going to save on the cost of the land carry while the site plan gets approved. And maybe there's a win-win that we can help move energy efficiency forward quicker, and we can maybe get EV chargers in garages. There's all these things we can all use our expertise and our knowledge to move it ahead. But what we can't do is just say, add all these extra things, and the average house in Ottawa goes from $950,000 to $1,050,000. Like that can't be the answer. It can't be just add $100,000 to the average cost of a house. So let's find a way. Like maybe, I don't know if it's through this committee or it's through the zoning bylaw, but the answer can't be add more cost to the average cost of a house, because millennials can't afford it, and all we're going to do is make affordable housing worse. But what I mean is the people that need subsidized housing. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mohammed, you put your hand up again there.
Yeah, just very briefly, just in response to David, I think it is a very important kind of, topic to be analyzed. And it's great that, I think we need to get feedback from industry and feedback from the builders and from the developers to kind of really put a value on the aspirations of the city and the aspirations of, what we're, so is this, and then finally, ultimately, the judgment call, who makes that judgment call, what something is worth and what something, it is okay to increase the cost of homes by this, because that's how much value we put on our, sustainability in our future. So that's, I don't know if one person can make that judgment call, but it is a very important kind of topic of debate, and you kind of have to get feedback from, real feedback like David's getting, values, costs, and evaluate that. But ultimately, who makes that call in the city? Who puts out these goals and looks at these costs and say, yes, it's worth it. We're going to go ahead with this, or no, we'll find another. There's a more cost-effective way or a more cost-beneficial way for us to get a positive impact that we're seeking with less cost to the consumer. Who makes these calls?
Yeah, Chair, if I may just really quickly, ultimately the answer to that question is council. that's the short answer to that question, because council picks the priorities we have, and we have a number of initiatives that are all driving costs. Like, I mean, it is a little bit scary. I mean, I have 2 young adult children, and I sat down last night, my wife and we were talking. It's like there's no way they could afford to buy my house. No way they could afford to buy a house probably within the city of Ottawa right now. There's just like there's no way of aspiring to it. Charmaine's kids are a little older than mine. We have the same conversation. It's, we've had an 86% increase in housing prices in Ottawa in 2 years, which is just astounding. I couldn't believe my neighbor told me what a house similar to mine around the block had sold. I was just shocked yesterday. I just don't even believe it. It worries me a lot. I lose sleep at night over this issue because I know we're adding costs. So our community benefits charge is going to add costs. High performance development standards are going to add costs. We're bringing in inclusionary zoning. We're going to be releasing that framework within a couple of weeks. And it's going to increase costs. And all of these things that are all important social goods are going to increase costs of housing. And I can tell you, we struggle with it. It's a hard nut to crack about the trade-offs we get, because it's not like I disagree with Mohammed, on the sustainability. I'm doing everything I can that I can afford to do in my own place. Probably could do more, especially if the government could help a little bit. If someone has figured out how to actually access those government grants, there's such a confounding process. It's so hard to administer. I could use some tips on that. But it's very, very difficult right now to control a very out of whack situation in Ontario. And what's driving that? What's driving that is probably a population growth beyond anything Ontario thought it was going to happen. The Ministry of Finance numbers were outstripped. We worry that what we just passed in our official plan, that population growth may exceed them. We'll wait and see. I don't know if Ottawa's going to go as fast. I know that in the Toronto area, they're definitely going to outstrip the population forecasts. It's pretty well known now that they're on trajectory for that. So it's and what's driving that? Some of that is population behaviors of the people who are here, whether the number of people per household, the number of kids people have, those are all numbers, birth, death rates, those are normal things. There's international immigration that drives that number, which is a significant number in Ottawa, but interprovincial migration has been a huge effect in Ontario. Like, I think no one predicted how many people would be moving to Ontario from the rest of Canada that has happened. And then there's other factors such as financialization of housing projects and Airbnb effects and those other sorts of things. There's just so many things going on at once. And we as a municipal government have to put recommendations from council on how to balance all of these different levers that are all going on at the same time. And cost is a very, very big concern. But I still want to protect trees. I still want better energy performance in buildings. I still want really nice quality streets for people to live in. I want a variety of housing choices so that if you want high density, you can live in. If you want something else, you can live in. Like, that is still, I mean, the official plan represents what we want to get, but we have all of these factors we're trying to do. So I can tell you that, the department worries about all of these things. The question is, what can we do about it at any given point in time is it's not always obvious. So Chair, I'm probably going way off topic here, but I just wanted to lay that out. We do think about these things.
Yeah, I'm not sure there is an off topic at Planning Advisory Committee. We hold a pretty broad brush here. All right, thanks for that, Steve. And I know it's the housing thing. I've talked to Jeff Lieber about this quite often too. Just the whole, obviously we have very different communities that we represent, very different areas that we live in. And I recognize the immense privilege that I'm about to throw out here, but I live in $1 million home that I paid $500,000 for 2 years ago. It makes no sense to me. I see vacant lots next to me are being sold for half the price I paid for my house. A vacant lot on land that you can't build on, because without maybe $100,000 to $200,000 worth of fill to get you out of a wet condition without a constantly running sump pump. Like, it makes no sense to me what's going on. And that's North Core. You're still nowhere close.
Scott, you got muted.
Yeah, I just muted myself. I accidentally hit my space bar. Apparently that's an option. So we live in North Core, you pay this much money, but you're nowhere close to the things that you need to live your life. You still have to drive everywhere. You can't buy essentials. I mean, you can go to the Mulligans and get alcohol, which is why most people are in there. But for the most part, you have to go to Campbell, you have to go into Barhaven, Mantic, Richmond. But I mean, it's not necessarily sustainable. And it used to be one of the affordable places. Manotick is $1.2 million average home price. That's ridiculous. At the turn of the century, it was, you could buy a home on West River on the back channel of the Rideau River for $130,000. Now it's $1 million. So I don't know what the solution. I mean, that's the problem too, is that we're leaders. We want to have answers. We don't have those. I mean, the question about who makes the decisions, we often try to find a balanced decision at the end of the day. We know that we have advocates that ask for more considerations when it comes to building to make things better for the future. But then we also know that we have the building advocates to say, well, listen, you need to make this easier for us. You can't add red tape. You have to make it streamline the process. Don't ask for so much from us because we're trying to deliver an affordable home. And all the while, we actually have another issue, which is a different type of affordable housing, which we don't have nearly enough of. So it's, there's lots at play here, and this issue is not going away, and it's not getting easier in the next several years. So good conversation as always, though. And I actually was thinking too, Steve mentioned Nick Stowe, what he might bring to a conversation. I've talked in the past about Andrea Flowers and her group with climate resiliency. I know that comes up a lot. We don't have another meeting scheduled until the fall. I wonder if it wouldn't hurt to I can work with Eric, and if you all wouldn't be interested in maybe a meeting, even throw one into June sometime, some evening in June, getting together and maybe having more conversations, knowing that we have this opportunity to talk about what could come next term and where to focus on next term.
Definitely.
Okay, I've got, other councilors are going to be worried about running for re-election. I don't have to worry about that stuff, so I got a lot of free time coming in the summer. But yeah, so I'd be happy to do that because I think it's good, and I think it's nice to be able to get some different representatives here and from the city and talk about some things and just have that conversation. So good. Any other questions for Steve? Does somebody want to ask a question of John just because he's been here? Like John, how many building permits did you issue in 2021?
Well, funny you should ask, Councillor. 11,792.
How much above the record is that?
Well, that actually is a record to the best of my knowledge. Usually we track around 10,000, and so we got up close to 12. And why? Well, a lot of pool enclosure permits, a lot of small renovation permits, people putting in finishing basements, home offices, and the like, largely pandemic related, I would suspect. But the value is also sky high, almost $4 billion again. ICI is going crazy, tower cranes all over the place. So yeah, we're hopping. So yeah, record year.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you, John.
Well, thank you, everybody. Good chat.
Thanks, Jermaine, too, as well. I'm going to go back to, what's funny, while we were sitting here, I Google stuff because I don't know, I do. Mohammed, I never realized that you work at Moriyama and Toshima. For those of you who don't know, Raymond Moriyama was the architect for our city hall. Corleone knows that because she's an architect.
And the Canadian War Museum.
Right.
And they've been highly involved in the new Visitors Center for Parliament.
Okay,
which is a spectacular building.
Stop honing in on my bias. It's City Hall, man. City Hall. What's more important than City Hall?
It's definitely a big part of our legacy. Very proud of that. Absolutely.
It's a great, there's a bunch of little intricacies of City Hall with of course, it was the former regional municipality of Ottawa, Carleton, and there's little things all through the building that speak to the number of municipalities that made up the region. And as you go through it, there's all these little sort of shout outs to that. And it's fascinating. I've done tours of it with the sort of notes that you have of the design features of the building. It's quite, it's a neat story that building tells. The other thing is, I think the stairwell, there's holes. If you look in the stairwell that runs from the next outside council chambers, there's holes through the underside of the stairs. I believe they line up at the solstice, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It's quite, it's interesting. It's very interesting. Some of the stuff, the tidbits of that building, but it's a good story. All right, good. Enough of irrelevant stuff that I wander into. Going back to the agenda, which I should bring it up here. Okay, so We have to receive the update for information. Is the update received on item 1? Great, thank you all. So notice the motion, there's likely none. Inquiries, there's likely none. Other businesses, likely none. So then there's just adjournment. So our next meeting is to be determined, but as I said, I'm going to see if we can get together, do something in June, pick an evening. Do Wednesday nights generally work for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll look at a Wednesday in June, likely in early June, and then go from there. So appreciate that, everyone, and we are adjourned. Enjoy your night.
Thanks, everyone.
So
Take
much,
care.
everyone.
Dave.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the ideas.
Great.
Thank you.